every time you say yes to something, you are also saying no to something else.
How do I like basically discipline my parent when my whole life they have disciplined me?
Sometimes it takes me like weeks to get answers to that. Why am I acting this
Yes,
way?
not every hang has to be like how it feels with your best friends.
You don't get to demand to be understood all the time. That's not how it works. Hey, welcome back. We're not for everyone, and neither are you. And this is a podcast hosted by one hater, one lover. I'm so excited about this episode, Hessica, because we were talking about the art of saying
Mm.
no.
It is
Mhm.
an art. It is an art. It's not a science. Most of our episodes are about science, but not today. It is totally an art that we will fine tune for life, I think.
I had like a little flash of a nightmare daydream the other day thinking about I was reviewing the disclaimers that we put in our episodes and that lawyers told me to put on my YouTube channel of being like, I'm not a professional, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a therapist, like all the things you have to put.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about all the times that we just say we are scientists.
Well,
And I
that's
was
why we have to
picturing
put it in the description
I know.
because
I
we
was
say
like,
it so much.
I was just picturing myself being up on the stand defending myself and then just playing a montage, like a super cut of clips of me saying, and I'm a scientist, I'm a scientist. And then them just being like, what do you have to say for yourself? And I'll just be like, I thought it was a silly thing to say. I don't know. But we're
Honestly,
not.
somebody
We're
could
not.
make a video of you saying you're a scientist with AI, so it doesn't even matter anymore what we say. It can be
That's
created if
true.
we didn't say it. That's
That's an
why
amazing point.
thank you so much. I just don't care anymore. It's written in the description
That's
and
important to not
that
care.
means that
Yeah.
we put it there and
Yeah.
that will go down in the law. I don't know. That'll go
Yeah.
down in court.
As
The
they say, that'll go
documents.
down in the law.
It'll go down in the law. Yeah, we were really craving doing a For You episode, like a deep dive on a certain vibey topic area. And after getting submissions from our kook listeners, it felt like saying no was kind of all encompassing of a lot of different messages we've received lately. And I think the way that I
Hmm.
thought of it was I'm going to read the specific little short message that made me think of this topic because I feel it is ever present. And we've talked about it before, and we're going to talk about it more. So this
Hmm.
person wrote, how to get comfortable saying no to hanging out with people when your only reason is you don't want to hang out with them. You're not busy, you're not tired, you're not burned out. You just don't feel like giving them your time. And I was like, I mean, heard, like I agree. And that is really hard. And I feel like we've talked about it a bunch and we have not really cracked the code. I don't think there's like one answer to that, but I think
Hmm.
maybe it starts with a broader acceptance that saying no is going to be a part of your life. And
Mm.
that is why the topic for the episode made sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great topic selection.
How do you want to do this? Should we?
No, that's a hard question. That first one to do is so hard for me, and I don't think I have a super healthy answer. Like,
It
there's
doesn't have
some
to be
things.
healthy. Does it
Well,
have to
I
be
just
healthy?
mean, well, I guess it doesn't have to be healthy, but like, if I go on a rant or when I go on a rant, inevitably on the podcast, it's because I feel like it's not just because I love the sound of my own voice, but it's because usually I feel like really confident that I've put a lot of constructive energy towards like solving it in a healthy way. And I don't have that confidence about this.
Right. Let me give us a more in-depth what to do of the same kin,
Yeah. Okay.
and maybe that'll help us get somewhere.
Cool.
So this person wrote, what to do? I have a difficult one regarding an old friendship. My friend and I have known each other since we were in pre-K 24 years ago. We grew up together until I moved away as a teenager, but stayed in touch sporadically over the years. She moved to Boston a few years ago, and by chance, so did I last year for a grad program. We've since met up a few times to hang out, and I have discovered that while I care about this person a lot, we don't really have much in common anymore. It seems like the only thing we really have to talk about is that we've been friends for as long as we have. My friend keeps reaching out, though, despite our few hangouts being lukewarm at best. I am really busy with my grad program, and when I do have time to be social, I would rather spend it with people I have a really good time with. I feel guilty about this because my old friend is the type of person that would show up if I ever needed her. She's truly got a heart of gold, but we've just turned out to be such different people, and I find myself wondering if we'd even be friends if we hadn't met when we were kids. We got so many messages like this, by the way. We got
Yeah.
probably the most submitted message in the last week after prompting for them was like, there's this person who I've known for a long time, whether it's a friend or family member or what have you, and we have like a long-standing, deep, quote unquote, bond. But I'm finding out that like our values have shifted away from each other, our priorities have
Mm-hmm.
shifted away. Like we just don't have as much in common and have as much fun with each other anymore. And what do you do in that situation? Um, which I feel like is really normal and natural.
Oh yeah.
And I've definitely been through it. And it's awkward in the moment. Like looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, it just fades. And then now I'm fine. Like, I don't know. It just fades and then you look back on it as a fond relationship and still if they ever needed you, you can be there and like that part doesn't have to change, but you can just let it fade out. And that's the easy thing to say in retrospect, but I remember in these moments feeling very like burdened by it and really guilty and like ashamed of how I was or was not showing up for people who I felt like I was supposed to show up for, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally. I think what I felt in those moments was a lot of urgency. Like, I need to make the call on this. Yes, we're going to
Mm,
stay in touch, or no, we're not staying in touch. And like, I need to make it now. And I think letting go of that urgency and that pressure to like make a call one way
yeah.
was the one thing I figured out that has really helped me. And you've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but that like there can be people who are, in your life at a frequency of once every 6 months. Like, that's great. That's a level of relationship. That can be a very
Hmm.
special level of relationship, a different kind. And I think accepting, for me, I think, yeah, I don't think I've solved this problem or this challenge in a really like holistic way. But the biggest thing that helped me was taking away that feeling of urgency of being like, oh, well, if I see them one more time, if I say next, yes, the next time, then they're going to expect this forever. And this is going to be forever. And I'm going to be stuck seeing somebody I don't connect with forever.
Yeah.
That feeling of, based on if I say yes or no to this next thing, it's going to be forever. It's just not. Things can continue to change. So for me, I feel like what I've done is be like, okay, the next time we hang out, if it works for my schedule, and if I feel energetically up for something that is not necessarily that energetically fulfilling, which like sometimes I'm up for that, sometimes I'm not. There's plenty of things I do which are not 100% energetically fulfilling, and I still do them for a reason. That's okay. I can go to that hangout or that catch up or that coffee, and it still doesn't mean I need to see them again in 2 weeks. And it doesn't mean I need to see
Yeah.
them again in 4 months. Like, I can just play it by ear, kind of. The ways
Yeah.
I've dealt with it is just realizing that, if we hang out once, it doesn't mean I have to see them immediately again. It's not, this is forever. And sometimes I show up to a hangout and I just like try to find one perspective because it's so obligation based. I do try to have the attitude of like, what is something I can get from this? What is something I can learn from talking to them today? Someone who's in a different life stage, someone who is a different life than me. Like, what's something, maybe I can learn something for the podcast. I love learning about people. What's some value I can take from this if I'm going to put in the effort? And so I don't know. I don't know if that's what I would advise everyone to do because I think in some of those dynamics, it's also okay to just be like, I'm not going to have this person in my life, but that's at least the way I've dealt with it.
Yeah. I really like how you highlighted the word urgency because I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at earlier. Like this sense when you're in it of urgency, like I have to make a decision about this. And now having hindsight from a few different relationships that have kind of faded out in a similar way, I realized that like the urgency and pressure I was putting on myself at the time was really unneeded because I've seen how those relationships have like faded out and then come back. I've seen how it's possible to have someone in your life even if you don't see them regularly. Like I think when you were talking and telling that story, you can still care about a person and not like them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Totally.
people really discount that as an option. I think I
Mm-hmm.
feel that way about a lot of people actually. Like
Yeah.
we don't connect. Your personality is one that really bugs me. Your temperament is one that doesn't like mesh well with mine. Like I don't necessarily feel at ease or myself with you, but you've not wronged me. And in fact, you've actually expressed a lot of appreciation for me and you at certain times too. Like I've had many relationships that fit that description and I think it's okay. Like I can care about them. I can be a person that if they called me in an emergency, I would be there for them. And it doesn't mean that they have to be my friend that I talk to every day, every month, even every year. Um, that's something that struck me in this What to Do actually was how they said like the friend that they no longer feel close with is the type of person that would be there for them no matter what. And she has a heart of gold and like the
Mm-hmm.
guilt of, feeling like you're abandoning a friend like that. But I feel like I don't know. For me, I feel like having someone in your life who you would drop everything to help in an emergency, I feel that way about a lot more people than I have best friends and close friends and people who I talk to
Mm-hmm.
every day. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think like both can exist. You can care deeply and show up for somebody in a crisis if they needed you and didn't have anyone else. And that's just like being a person that cares.
Mm-hmm.
Um, versus having to maintain like a regular relationship where you see each other and you talk. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's about getting comfortable in the discomfort of that and getting comfortable with the unknown of like, okay, if I do say yes to this coffee, because you know what, I'm actually free and it actually feels like maybe I can get something out of it. Like you were saying, like maybe something's telling me, like, why not just go grab a coffee with them this week? I haven't seen them in a while, even if it's out of obligation. Like, even if you feel like, yeah, I haven't seen them in a while and I owe it to them. And so I will this time. Um, you can do that. And that doesn't make you like a bad person for leading them on. Don't show up and act like you want to see them next week again. Like, don't show up in a way that is misleading them to think that this is more than it is. But you can
Mm-hmm.
show up and just enjoy it for what it is and
Mm-hmm.
do it because you feel obligated. Like, that is a part of being a human. That is okay. So I think it's really about like just getting comfortable with the fact that like not every hang has to be like how it feels with your best friends, or not every
Totally.
relationship has to be the one that is everything, is the person you would, you know, run out of your house at 3 in the morning to help, and also is the person that you're texting every day about your favorite shows. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to all be that every time. It won't be. It's impossible. You don't have enough energy for that, and neither does anyone else. It's like literally impossible to do.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that you would probably go the route of like, okay, maybe we get a coffee once every 6 months or something?
Yeah,
Is that,
I
yeah,
think
like
so.
the,
That's what I've done is just
yeah.
like be less available and not say yes to every hang, but occasionally probably still see them just because it's somebody who I do think highly of or have some sort of history with. But it's much
Mm-hmm.
easier to see somebody like how the listener described it. Most of what they have to talk about is just like how long they've been friends, reminiscing and nostalgia of childhood and stuff like that. Like that can be
Yeah.
kind of nice once every 6 months or once a year or whatever.
Yeah. And it's the
So,
kind of thing where like you don't get another chance to make that ever. Like,
yeah, so true.
there's something very special about people who have known you since you were a child, and there is no replacement for it. There are other amazing kinds of connection, but there is nothing the same there's not an exact like equivalent that you can replicate for someone who knew you as a child. And I'm not saying that that means you have to see that person or that you have to be in touch at all. And I don't think either of us are saying that you are obligated to anyone about anything. When I
No.
use the word obligation, it's still a choice. I'm making a choice that I have ownership over. I choose to put energy towards this thing, and no one's making me, okay? I'm in charge of my life.
You
But
feel obligated. You're choosing, yes, you are choosing the
I choose it.
obligation.
It's a choice.
Yeah,
I think taking
totally.
ownership of that is important. But I'm also not saying that like anyone owes anyone anything. But I think you and I maybe it sounds feel similar in being like you don't know anyone anything, but they're also I think having like the staying open, like minimizing the exposure to that relationship so it's not
Hmm.
draining you, so you're not resenting them. But then if you choose to see them, like stay open to like what could happen here. Maybe you see them once a year, maybe it's twice a year, and you bookend it. It's a 1 hour coffee, and maybe there's nothing that you guys, there's really no overlap with you anymore, but it's like basically a conversation with a stranger who trusts you. And that's what it is. And
Yeah.
like, what is the stranger going to tell me today? Maybe they have a great story or an enlightening idea, or maybe it will be a fun reminiscing hangout, or, just kind of staying open to the possibility that you don't really know what that exchange holds for you. And it could hold something interesting, or it could be 1 hour that you're like, meh, that didn't really do anything for me. See you in 6 months.
Yep. So that brings us to like, how do you actually say no to that person? Because
Lol.
what she described is they now live in the same city again and they have been hanging out. And only
That's
after
hard.
hanging out kind of frequently and kind of regularly has she realized like this actually ain't it
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Um, that is definitely hard. And I don't think there's a right way to do it. Like there's not an answer that you're going to feel great about.
Yeah.
But I do think like how I have practically actually done it is fading out, not responding right away, declining a couple invites, even if that means I have to fib and say that I have other plans when really I don't. And then eventually, or at some point, I think there's also a way to be like, hey, I am feeling, if I don't know, you can debate whether this is like true for you and whether you would want to say something that is or is not true for you. But I feel like I've done this where I've just been like, hey, things are really busy lately. I am feeling really overwhelmed by like managing all the aspects of my life, which I feel like is generally true for everyone most of the time. Um, I will reach out to you when I have availability to hang out again. Like, I feel like you can do something like that where it's
Hmm.
like you put the onus on you. And that is with the intention. For me, that would require that I actually mean that part and
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will follow through on the hang. It just might not be for a few months or whatever. But if it's somebody that fits into the category that we've been talking about of like, you can have some relationship with them, it's just not going to be like the weekly hangout, then I would fade out and then at some point be like, the last time, the next time they text you, be like, hey, things are overwhelming right now. I need a little breathing room for my own sanity from like all aspects of my life. Like don't make it personal about them. I probably wouldn't. And then just be like, I'll reach out to you in, when I'm feeling more up for doing stuff. And then reach out to them in a few months. And then they will learn from that. It might be hard for them, but they will learn from that. Like, okay, she's only available in a few months. She's not available for the weekly thing. And they will make a decision as to whether that's okay with them or not.
Hmm.
You can't
Yeah.
control that part. So realistically, that's what I've done. And I feel like it mostly works, but I also feel like I am lucky to have pretty like emotionally mature friends who kind of like respect my boundaries when I set them.
Hmm.
Um, I know that that could look very different depending on the person.
Yeah. What do you mean? Like if they just keep texting you or something?
Exactly. They could just keep trying. They could confront. They could be like, "You've been acting different. What's up?" I don't know. There could be a
Yeah. Weird,
variety of
weird thing to do with someone you don't have much of a relationship with. But yeah, people do crazy
right.
things.
People do that,
Yeah. I agree. I
but I've
totally
not
agree
dealt with
with
it.
I totally agree with what you said. Oh, I mean, if people just keep texting me too much when I have made it clear what my texting patterns are, I just don't respond anymore. I'm not going to keep
True,
explaining it to you. Like, I'm just not responding. Um,
true.
but I think what you said makes sense. It's not easy, but I totally agree. Yeah, I think some people might say like you should be more direct with this, and of course that's mostly what we preach is the directness and saying the true thing. But I think it doesn't feel right in this situation. I think
Hmm.
um doing that would just be serving yourself. And I don't actually feel that that would be serving the other person unless they directly ask you. I actually think that being like, you know what? I just don't align with who you are anymore. Not enough time for that. And I'm doing me. I think that would only be hurtful to them. I think that's kind of a self-serving
Yeah.
thing to do in this moment. And I understand there will still be pain, probably for both people. I don't think there's really a way to eliminate pain in life, end of sentence. Um, but for an uncomfortable exchange that will require some pain, I think that what you described is I guess what I would do too. Yeah.
I also think that doing the direct thing, like saying exactly what's happening and why you want to set a boundary and whatever, it just feels like outsized for what's actually happening.
Yeah, good
It
call.
feels like it feels like an overreaction. Like to me, we preach boundaries all the time and we preach being direct all the time, but those are in the situations where someone has continually shown like disrespect for you, disrespect for your boundaries, really made you feel hurt. That's when I think a direct line in the sand is helpful. But this person hasn't actually done anything wrong as far as we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just not really vibing anymore. And so that's exactly why what you said, Caroline, is true to me is like, because they haven't hurt you, you don't need to lead with hurt. And I don't think you want to, because you probably, if it was that easy, you would have done it by now.
Yeah.
um, it's it's like they've done nothing wrong. There's no lesson to teach them. There's no like line in the sand that needs to be drawn. It's just like we aren't connecting to the level that I'm going to prioritize. And I don't need to tell you that. I can just show you that. And
Yeah.
hopefully you will pick up the hints and we can form a different type of relationship that feels better, that is less frequent and that like is less pressure filled. Um, but that depends on what the other person's response is. But yeah, I guess my main point is like the direct confrontation thing feels right when there is like hurt that's been caused or a boundary that's been crossed. But when it's just like we aren't connecting anymore, I think just show them a little grace and just do the I think a fade out can be respectful.
Totally.
I don't think it's like, oh, you're ghosting them. I'm not saying never respond to their texts ever again. That would be ghosting them. I'm saying just like reduce the investment and reduce the time and energy and hopefully they will pick up on those cues. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Because, like, they're not asking, are we going to be best friends? They're just asking if you want to hang out. So answer the question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hang out this time. I'm not available. If there's a different kind of established, like, foundation that we're best friends, then there's an implicit different question they're asking. And then I
Hmm.
think you owe, if you're best friends with someone, I wouldn't just fade out. I think that merits a different conversation, all that stuff.
Yeah, or if
Also,
it's sudden.
I was just watching this pigeon out my window. It was just like, I don't know, I was staring at this pigeon, then it pooped directly like in my eyesight. And I was doing a lot of grimacing in the last minute that I didn't mean to do. It just really caught me off guard while I was listening to you. And I don't want people on YouTube to think I was grimacing at you, but
Yeah, they really do be over analyzing our facial expressions
oh,
and like
yeah.
picking up our phones and stuff. I like everything Caroline says, okay? I just also have to look at the what to do's on my phone.
You want to do the next one?
Let's do the next one. All right, this what to do is kind of an extension of what we were just talking about, but this time so much more complicated because it's about moms and we got a lot of messages about
About
boundaries with
moms.
moms. What to do? I love my mother very much, and we have a great relationship with mutual respect, except for her religion. She is very religious, and it's what I was raised in. I've since left and am raising my child without it. My mother continues to send books about faith to both me and my daughter, and anytime there is anything tough happening, she drops little comments about how I should try praying, or maybe my daughter would have fewer nightmares if she knew about Jesus. This is tough because I respect my mother's faith, but my personal experience has led me to leave it, and I'm just tired of her trying to convert me. But I don't know how to set this particular boundary because I don't want to lose her, and deep down, I'm afraid she'll choose her faith over her daughter. She has a wall up about this particular topic as well, and cannot hear that I don't care if she thinks I'm going to hell. How do I even approach this boundary?
So hard. It actually immediately makes me like tense.
Yeah, I don't know. This is
I
what
thought
I
you
can
said
speak to.
I thought you said you personally related to some version of this yeah.
Well, I relate to a version of this, sure. Not with regard to religion, but I definitely relate to a difference in values with parents as I've become an adult and formed my own
Mhm.
like view on the world and realized the things that I need and don't need in my life. And I, for a very long time, until very recently, and I still experience it to some degree, but it is much less. Um, Kind of lived in fear of that abandonment that this listener is talking about. Like she'll choose the religion over me. She'll choose that thing over our relationship. I definitely have struggled with that, not because of anything my parents have said to me. They would never say something like that. I actually think if they knew that I felt that way, it would break their hearts. Um but it's a feeling. It's like a perception because you grow up with these figures in your life who are like your gods. She had religion, you had her. Like,
Mhm.
it's your mom. She gave you everything. She was there when you needed her, assuming it was a positive relationship other than the religion thing, which it sounds like it was because you want to keep her in your life. You haven't brought up other concerns. Sounds like she was, for the most part, a pretty good mom to you, but you just have differences in how you want to live your life now and how you want to raise your daughter, which is the point, the point of life and the point of generations and the point of like learning as time goes on. So you shouldn't feel bad about that. But it's like this huge figure to you that is really hard to stand up to and who you just want to understand and accept you.
Mhm.
And she's not being able to show up in that way. And I totally don't blame you for creating this like thought in your head of like she'll choose it over me. And I don't know your mom, I don't know your situation. Like that could also be more valid than it was in my situation. I know that many people do experience like a very severe if you're not part of this thing that we do as a family, then you're out. So I don't want to diminish that experience either. It's just not something I can speak to. Like I don't think that those fears for me were founded in anything true uh or anything that would actually happen. It was just founded in my anxiety because of this like huge pedestal that I had put my parental figures on and how
Mhm.
afraid I was to like break the mold from what they wanted for me. And I don't think I can condense how I worked through that into like one podcast episode, but I do think you need to start saying no. Like I do think that just starting to set those boundaries, even if you start small and work your way up,
Mhm.
is like pretty much the only option you have to maintain the life that you want and to maintain what you hope to be a positive relationship with your mother. Like, it's not positive as it is right now. You're like stressed out about it, and she's, imposing her beliefs on you, and like, you're just existing in kind of the status quo because you're uncomfortable with the idea of making a big change. But the status quo isn't very good right now. So I do think that you need to kind of look at it and figure out like the small ways that you can start to make changes, the small ways that you can start to set those boundaries. Um, because like just existing in it, nothing's going to change. I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful.
I
That's
think
what
it's
I got
super
so
helpful,
far.
Jess. Oh, that's super helpful. I think it's amazing just to hear you share how deeply complicated it's been for you, for this person. I love what you shared. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. What should they do though? Like, what should they
What
do?
do they do?
What to
Okay,
do?
what a freaking do. My thoughts. Well, one thing I thought while you were talking, when you mentioned like you and the listener mentioned this like terrible pain that happens when the people you love cannot understand something about you. And I've found, I think in the last couple years, that was like one of my biggest adult discoveries is one of the greatest pains is not being understood. And one of the biggest things you have to accept, I think you as you grow up, is that you do not get to force people to understand you. That's not within your control. And
Hmm.
you will have gaps in understanding with some of the people you're closest to and the people you love the most. And you don't get to demand to be understood all the time. That's not how it works. And I think it's like one of the most painful things. I think it's been the most painful thing about being on the internet for me, this feeling, this futile feeling that like, well, if I just like explain myself, if I just explain that comment, if I just explain this rant, if I just explain this perspective, I can take care of that pain or I can take care of that misinterpretation or, and you just can't do it all. And I don't think you can do it in life either. So I think one step for me would be accepting your mom most likely will not ever understand your perspective or care to
Hmm.
understand it or like see where you're coming from. That doesn't really sound like something you should be holding out for. And I think in a lot of relationships, it's you have to give that up in certain places. Um, and then I think the second part of like what you would logistically do, I do think it depends a lot on your mom's specific personality because I think when I've encountered
Yeah.
this, the approach definitely depends on like what you know about the person, like knowing people's motivations, knowing what discourages people, knowing what they respond to and don't respond to, what makes them shut down, what makes them open up. So I do think it's really personal, but the time I think I had the most success with this. I'll share what worked for me, but of course, you're going to have to evaluate if this sounds like it suits your scenario, which is honestly kind of, it's like you need to train them. You have to be incredibly consistent and you have to be incredibly calm. I think a lot of it is how you do it. And the calm part is probably the hardest part for me. But I think like step one is having like one heart to heart, which is setting the expectation. This is what's feeling difficult for me in the dynamic. This is how I feel about it. This is how I love you. This is what I would like to see as the change. And this is what I'm going to do in the moments when that doesn't happen. And it doesn't mean she's not going to have a change of heart. She's not going to care. She's going to fight you. She might yell. Who knows what she'll do? But you've set the expectation. You've said it once and she's heard it because she has ears. And then the consistency comes in where in the moment, I think it's really hard because they're these little embedded tiny comments. It's not a blow up fight. It's not an angry screaming thing. It's these little embedded moments that seem even harder to deal with, but even more insidious for that reason. And so I think you have to be super consistent. Your mom makes one little comment. Oh, well, she wouldn't be having nightmares if she was praying more about Jesus, you know, incredibly calm. You say, Mom, we discussed this. If there's another
Hmm.
comment about that, my daughter and I will be leaving the home. Incredibly calm. The calmer you are, the quieter you can talk, the more effective it's going to be. And the less room, like the more they'll know you fucking mean it. As soon as you're screaming, you're communicating that you don't have any control over the situation. And you're not the
Hmm.
one blowing it up. If you get quieter and calmer, you are you're not the one who's snowballing this scenario, right? Even though it's a big moment for you, you're not going to be the one to snowball it. You're going to be the one who stays calm. So you give one warning, like you gave to a toddler, and then the next time, if she makes one more comment, you and the daughter leave the house. If you can't get her to leave the house, you and the daughter leave. Or that's the end of the visit. Grandma's going home now. Or, okay, we're canceling our plans for tomorrow. Like there's an immediate consequence. You don't give three warnings. You remind them of the expectation one time if you want, if that even feels appropriate. Maybe you have the first talk and you don't give them reminders. But I think you could give like that one very calm reminder. And then if they do it again, there's an immediate consequence. And it is not dramatic and it's not loud. It is quiet and it is calm and it is certain and it's immediate and it's consistent every single time. And I think with that kind of response, it's really hard for someone who genuinely loves you to write a narrative that you're being crazy, that you're destroying the relationship, that you're the one making it impossible to have a relationship with them. All it tells them is that like you're very calm and you're very serious about the boundary you set. And if they want to have those evening dates with you, then they're going to start listening. Like your mom's not stupid. She knows the expectation. She just also thinks that she can kind of, sneak a couple in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I would try. But again, it really depends on the personality. It is incredibly hard to execute. The calm is the hardest part, but I think it's like the key.
Yeah, I have two reactions. Your first point is spot on. And I think when it comes to the calm and showing up calmly in those moments, it actually ties in a lot with your first point about, you know, just accepting that your mom's probably never going to understand, let alone agree with how you've
Hmm.
decided to raise your daughter outside of the church. Like, that shouldn't be the goal. And I think once you can truly accept that, like, the goal is not understanding, the goal is not consensus, the goal is not agreement, the goal is not approval, like,
Hmm.
you're not looking for any of those things from her,
Hmm.
then you can show up more calmly. You can show up more grounded. You can show up more in your voice. You can show up more self assured. All of that comes from just knowing, like, all I'm
Yeah.
trying to do is have a relationship, a positive relationship where we can coexist even with our differences.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to accept, like, okay, then I'm not trying to change anything about her. I'm
Yeah. She
just
doesn't have to
trying
like
to,
it. Like,
yes,
you're not saying you have to like this, you have to agree. You don't even have
right.
to acknowledge it. All you have to do is not open your mouth. All you have to do is
Then we don't
respect
talk
that.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah, you're just all I'm asking is that you are decent. You respect this in my home. You do not have to like it.
exactly. Exactly. And that is what being an adult is. And you're right,
Yeah.
Caroline, that like it can be like talking to a toddler. Um, but hold them to an adult expectation and show up
Yeah.
yourself as an adult. You're not the child to the parent. It's two adults in a room trying to exist together. So
Hmm.
I think that part is super important. The part about having a consequence is so difficult for me. I don't
Otherwise,
think
it's
I've
not a boundary. It's
ever
not a
done that.
boundary then. Then it's not a boundary.
Agreed. Yes. I agree that like there needs to be a demonstration that the boundary is being upheld. And basically, that is a consequence. I think it would be hard for me personally, and I could see how it would be hard for anybody um, to be like, okay, you made this comment and now we're leaving or something. Like in the
Hmm.
moment,
Well,
consequences.
it doesn't have to be that. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be physically
exactly.
leaving. There's a bunch of different ways that you could cut them off from your emotional openness or
Right.
from a bunch of different things, but there does have to be a consequence or it is by definition not a boundary. It's a pleading, begging request. That's the
Yes.
difference between a request and a boundary. A
Yes,
boundary
totally.
always has a consequence.
So I was wanting to like offer some alternatives that might
Yeah.
feel softer, easier to
Mm-hmm.
do at least at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
because like practically if I'm putting myself in the shoes of this listener or just with the relationship that I know that I have with my mom or with my parents, like
Mm-hmm.
I and I think this also is culturally informed for me, like um the thought of like it does feel severe to me to like leave the house
Mm-hmm.
at the mention of something that I've told my mom I have a boundary around. It might not feel severe to everyone. It might be the right way for some people to show consequences to that boundary being crossed. For me, it's like I don't know that I could ever do that with my parents. But
Yeah.
what I
And I'm not
can
saying that
do,
it's not severe. I'm saying that the severity is the point.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
But
But
I
I
also
think that there's
understand it might
other
be too
ways.
much for some people to try. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just think
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
keep me from doing it at all.
Mm-hmm.
If I
Gotcha.
think like, oh, that's the goal. And so that's why I want to be like, another way that that can look is,
Mm-hmm.
um, okay, then we won't be sharing these aspects of like you don't get to, we won't be telling you about like how school went that day for her or something. Like if you think that she needs to be going to a religious school and that's not what I'm choosing to do,
Mm.
then like we're not going to invite you to the school events where the grandparents come, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get to hear about her school day to day, or I don't know, even like less directly. You could also show the consequence of a boundary without actually naming it to them. And so it could just be like, they're not going to get a call from you. They're going to have to be the first one to
Yeah.
call after that hangout. Like there's littler ways I think that I've at least practiced setting my boundaries. I think that they've gotten bigger as time has gone on, but like starting out for me, it felt like how do I like basically discipline my parent when my whole life they have disciplined me? Like I was really stuck in that mindset for a really long time of like I have to respect them.
Yeah.
I can't like train them and discipline them and show them consequences. Like maybe I can express exactly what you're saying, like a request, like request that they treat me in a certain way, but I can't actually like implement um a punishment if they don't. Like it's my parent. And so anyway, I feel like the way that I started to do that a little bit more and started to like show that I'm serious about my boundary is by unfortunately at times pulling away, like you said, pulling away emotional closeness, pulling away like information, calling less, not coming over every single time. Just showing like I'm going to be less available to you in the ways that you're used to if you continue to cross the boundaries that I've set. So, yeah, it's a little less like real time for me, I think. I think in real time I have definitely said like very calmly like you said like, you know, please I've told you why it I find it inappropriate for you to bring that up. Please don't do that. Let's change the subject. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've done that before in real time, but I haven't also implemented like a consequence in real time. It'll be more like there's a consequence later if you do it again or something. Does that make sense? I
It
rambled.
does. It does. And I think that everything that you shared about like keeping more distance and the more indirect things and maybe not calling as much are like, I completely agree in terms of that just protects you.
Mm,
And your energy and how much you want to expose yourself to something that's really stressful. Um, but can I push back a little bit
yeah,
while knowing that this is a sensitive topic?
of course. And I think by the way, just to be clear, part of my pushback is not only because of my own experiences, which a lot of it is coming from there, but also
Mm-hmm.
I can just hear people being like, "Well, I can't do that." And so I like the pushback in this conversation because I want
Okay.
to get to something that like feels
Yeah.
doable, you know?
I think it covers exactly the reaction that a lot of people would have hearing it. I
Yeah.
do agree. I think my opinion based on my experience is that the boundary does need to be like an actual boundary does need to be more direct because if you even mentioned at one point like they might not even know that I'm calling less because of the consequence that's the consequence, and to me that kind of nullifies um the boundary, if they, to me, it's incredibly important that they know this thing is happening because of what they did immediately,
Mm,
whether it's in that moment or the next day, that some way they are told, okay, so in a month from now, you're not invited to that grandparent event at school. But the correlation is extremely important in my experience because if you want to go with the toddler metaphor, then it's like, if they're drawing all over the walls and 2 weeks later I take away their, dessert, there's no connection. But I think more relevant, speaking with adults, is that people are really good at writing narratives. So immediately
yeah,
when I think of a parent criticizing the religious path their child has taken, that parent, I want to say 99 or 100% of the time, is going to say, and you know what? They're not even calling me now. And that's because they're so out of touch with their
totally.
faith. And if they were in touch with their faith, they would know that calling their parents is important. What I want to say 100% of the time, they write a narrative about how the punishment, the quote, the consequence that you think you're delivering to them, clearly or unclearly, is completely unrelated to their actions. And it's actually just a reflection of their prior complaint.
Yeah.
And you know what? They don't even talk to me anymore. They don't even share anything about themselves anymore. I can feel they're pulling away. And that's because they don't have the correct values of our religion. So to me, the doing it the indirect way, like I think pull away in all those ways to protect yourself emotionally, to protect yourself from overexposure to really negative, damaging, dynamics in the relationship. Absolutely do those things. Absolutely protect yourself. But I think you have to be, um, to me, that is not a boundary, and it most likely will actually lead to more tension if the connection is not very clearly explained, because then it snowballs and it becomes this reactive thing. And it becomes, well, I'm only commenting about your religion because you don't seem to have family values anymore. I don't even get calls from you. And I think it actually usually makes it worse. So that's the reason that I feel like that is a really important part to protect yourself, what you described, but it feels very different to me than setting a boundary, which
Yeah,
needs, in my experience, to have a direct connection, because otherwise it all just becomes more of their narrative.
that's a really good point. I think what's hard is that in my situation, in my experience, um, that would happen either way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, could be.
like punishing, that is how it would be framed. It's not a punishment. It is a consequence of not um upholding a boundary. But I could totally see how a parent, especially a parent like mine, would frame it as like, oh, now you're punishing me.
Well, what's wrong with
And
punishing people for disrespecting you? What's
well,
wrong with that?
sure, but
That is what a consequence is.
it would become like, and this is just how you treat me now that you're doing this thing that I don't approve of. Like it kind of would happen either way.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah, yeah.
and not always, but in a lot of, I think sometimes it would. And so I don't know. That's just what makes this a really hard
It's very
situation.
hard.
There's not a perfect way to do it. Um, Another place that I was coming from when I was saying like you don't always need to name it, I think maybe I flipped it in my head. Um, there have been situations for me with my parents and with my mom specifically where I want to share certain aspects of my life with her, but
Hmm.
because of her difference in opinion about like the way that I'm choosing certain aspects of my life, um, it, I'm a person that like clams up and withholds when I'm met with that. And
Hmm.
so, unlike the listener who's saying, I do talk about, you know, this, that, the other with me and my daughter, and my mom makes it about religion, I think they are more of a confrontational household, maybe, or a more
Hmm.
open household. I come from a more avoidant household and anti-afraid of confrontation household where probably none of those topics would be talked about. They would just be like living underneath the surface. And something that I've wanted to work on is like being able to talk about the thing I want to talk about, regardless of what the response is going to be. And
Mhm.
I've talked to my therapist about that and worked a lot on it in therapy. And I'll be like, okay, so I need to make an announcement. I need to make some sort of like announcement and make it really clear that, like, hey, I'm going to start talking about this thing that's a part of my life, even though you don't approve of it. Okay, so now I'll start next time I talk, we're going to start doing it that way. And my therapist has been like, why do you need to make that announcement? Just start doing it. And so I
Mhm.
think that's where a little bit I was like conflating a few things in my head. And as you were talking,
I
I
see. Oh,
parsed
I
through the
see.
difference.
I
Um,
see. The thing that you're actively gonna start adding is not.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Like
that makes
almost like
sense.
the
I agree.
boundary that I would have been setting is a boundary of, it's not really a boundary. It's like I want to feel safe here to talk about things in my life, even if you don't agree with them. And so
Yeah.
I do think that that applies to the listener. But the
Hmm.
difference is that in my dynamic, it's more avoidant. And so, yeah, I've felt like I need to name this and say like, hey, I'm going to start talking about these things, even though you disagree. But it sounds like they're already trying to do that, and the mom is just jabbing in the ways that she's jabbing. And so I think it's like
Yeah.
two sides of the same coin, maybe, but a little bit of a
Totally.
different approach that you would take depending on the environment.
I see what you're saying now, and I do agree. I think it's two sides of the same coin. And to me, the connecting theme is that not just in what you say, but in what you do, you communicate confidence in your choice. Whether
Yes.
it's your confidence to talk about the thing, if you kind of announce, oh, well, I'm going to start talking about this, and I want you to know, and I want to be respected. You're asking permission,
Yes.
and you're still asking if it's okay in a way, as opposed to when you just start doing it the way that you did. And if you keep telling somebody, please, please don't bring up religion, please, your words say one thing, but you're not communicating that you stand behind your position of not allowing that. And I think both just have to come down to like a calm confidence. I'm just going to start doing this thing, and I fully believe my ability to follow through. And you can
Yes.
keep up or you won't. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Good luck to this listener. That's a lot. And we did get multiple
Woof.
messages on that too, and like religion specifically, which um makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, one more, shall we?
Yeah, baby girl.
All right. So this person had a different take on saying no. Um, they said, "Hey, love your podcast. I feel less alone in my own place when I listen." Cute. Now to the saying no thingy. I don't know if it makes sense, but I have trouble saying no to myself. I make up these strict rules to myself, and if I decide to quote break them, I feel guilty or shit about myself. I've decided to stop volunteering for the choir I perform in. I was responsible for social events, and it was really hard for me to convince myself it's not being lazy or giving up on challenging myself. Can you relate? How do you know it's actually healthy to say no to yourself and be less strict and harsh by your own commitments to yourself? I really liked this and I relate to it a lot.
Hmm.
Um, because I do what it's an interesting like flip on the saying no theme, but I do what they're talking about a lot of like giving myself allowances and there's two ways to frame it. One way to frame it is like I'm giving myself allowances, I'm cutting myself too much slack. I'm like saying no to things that I actually should be doing. And then the flip side of it is like, maybe I'm just saying no to things that are like no longer working for me, or I thought they would be good for me and then they turned out that they weren't. And it's okay to say no to those things. It's like giving yourself permission to quit something,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody wrote
Um,
in about how um learning that I can't remember the exact DM, maybe you have it on you, but somebody else wrote in on that theme of like realizing that saying no can take as much courage as saying yes. It's not just one or the other.
yes.
Yeah, which I think is a really big and great point. Go on though.
Uh, yeah, I was just looking for it because I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, I it made me think of in the winter. I talked about this on the podcast in our episodes back in like January of this year, 2024. Um, I had signed up for a stand-up comedy class. It was not my first time doing that, but it had been a few years and I was like, it could be fun to get back on stage and do some comedy. I feel like this will be really good for me. And I went to a couple classes and it
Yeah.
just like was not feeling the way I wanted it to. And I was really hard on myself about even considering dropping the class. And then when I did it, after a lot of encouragement from like Caroline and my friends who were like, why are you being so hard on yourself? This is not fun for you. And your goal was for it to be fun. So just give yourself a break and quit. It's okay. Um, I felt like immediately free. It was like totally the right decision. But I
Hmm.
think that it had said something about me to join the class and to sign up for it in the first place. Like I was almost telling myself and signaling to myself, like, look, you're still this person who can get on a stage and be funny. And that meant something to you and that made you feel good about yourself for a time anyway. And um, I just like saw it as a virtue to be participating in stand-up comedy. And
Yeah.
so the thought of quitting something that I had seen as like a virtuous, amazing, cool, interesting talent of mine or hobby of mine or whatever, I had to let go of like the identity that was wrapped up in it, really.
Hmm.
And the truth is that my identity had actually shifted and changed because it was something that used to be fun for me. And so at that time it made sense that it like was wrapped up in my identity because I enjoyed it. But then
Hmm.
realizing like, hey, I'm not actually enjoying this made me realize, okay, maybe it's not part of my identity anymore. So maybe I can quit it and it doesn't have to mean anything because it's not even like it's not working for me. I don't know. I'm so rambly this episode.
No, 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 no.
Uh
I love everything you're saying. No, completely.
yeah.
Completely. I
Eh,
know how hard that was for you. It was a huge identity piece. This thing that again, I think it was like you were taking it as, well, if I quit, what does it mean about me?
yeah.
If
What
I
does it
don't keep
say?
volunteering for my choir, what does it say about me? What does it mean about me? Does it mean I'm lazy? Does it mean I'm a quitter? Does it mean all these things? And I think like if you can like kind of spot when you do that, because we all do that. If I say yes, it means this about me. If I say no, it means this about me. And
Yeah.
you actually like caught yourself doing that and got really intentional about it. It's amazing, and it's such hard work, and no one else can do it for you. Only you can do that. To be like, why, honestly, why am I pressuring myself to do this or to not do it? No one
Yeah.
else can answer that for you. It's like this intense um investigation you have to do into yourself, and sometimes it takes me like weeks to get answers to that. Why am I acting this
Yes.
way? Why am I pushing in this direction? Why do I feel pressured or obligated or guilty? It takes like I feel like a lot of ruminating. I think you did an amazing job. I know how hard that was for you. It's a huge part of your identity in this narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge part of my narrative about myself, totally. And like I
Hmm.
did question a lot of the things that the listener is questioning of like, am I just being lazy? Am I just like, I just don't want to put the work in? Um, yeah, I just made it really reflect on me positively if I had stayed and said yes to it, and negatively if I had quit and said no, even though, yeah, quitting was so the right choice. So, what exactly was their question? Let me remember. They're saying, I
Like
did
learning to
this.
say no to yourself.
Yeah, because they already did it. Like when it comes to that class, they said, um, I've decided to stop volunteering for this choir. Yeah, so they've already made that decision. But I guess they're still in the phase of like, I'm being really hard on myself about it instead of
Yeah.
just knowing that it was right.
I have a perspective that might help.
Yeah.
Um, which is that like understanding that every time you say yes to something, you are also saying no to something else. There's no such
Yeah.
thing, unless you're a time traveler, there's no such thing as a yes in one place that doesn't involve a no elsewhere. And sometimes you're explicitly giving the yes, like, yes, I'm going to do choir. And sometimes you're and the no is implicit, like, so that means I won't be spending evenings with my friends, or that means I won't have as much time with my kids, or that means I won't be exercising as much, or that means my meals will be more frantic and less thoughtful, or I won't be working as much on the book I'm writing. You are sometimes the no is implicit, but sometimes the no is direct. I'm not going to put this time into choir anymore. And then the yes is implicit. Like the yes is going somewhere else. Maybe you don't know what the yes is yet, but you've opened up time there so that you can say yes to something else. So I think this
Hmm.
idea that just like yeses are good and nos are bad is complete nonsense. Every yes means you are saying no to something. It might be your family, it might be your well-being, it might be your friendships, it could be a million things, but you don't have infinite time. So all yeses are also a no. So don't just start, deifying yeses. And all no's can also be a yes, because they open up space for something else and that opportunity. And like, I wonder what I have space for now. Of course, you can also get into the zone where you're just saying no, 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 no. But I can't tell you when you're in that space. That again is like the investigation you have to do, and you have to be honest with yourself. I don't think there's like a number of no's we can like give you a number on, and then
Right.
you're in the red. It's something you have to be honest with yourself about. But for the most part, I think if you really struggle to say no, it's most likely that the times you do say no are really important. And yeah, I don't know. That's something that helps me a lot is like it's not like yeses are good and nos are bad. Every single yes includes a no elsewhere. And you may just not be being honest with yourself about it.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like reminding ourselves about the yeses too. I also think
Mm-hmm.
like it's totally allowed that I can imagine that this person quit their choir and what they're actually doing with that time and energy now is just like chilling,
Fuck yeah.
watching
It's
Netflix.
important. So
It's
important.
allowed. It's important. Like you
It's
probably
literally
need that because
important.
the rest of your day is busy or stressful or you've gone through something hard in the last few months and you're like decompressing from it. I often get really hard on myself about like I feel very busy, but I have plenty of time to watch my shows and I'm just working remotely from my apartment and like it's really not that hard. And I get really hard on myself about how tired I am at the end of every day for how
Yeah.
much or how little really like output I see from it on many days. And I was talking to my therapist about it a couple weeks ago and she was like, it's mental load. Like there's a lot of activity happening in your brain, whether it's about your personal life, your professional life, something else.
Mhm.
And that doesn't have to look like running around the city and being a boss bitch and getting a bunch of shit done all day long for you to
Mhm.
be tired at night. Like
Yeah.
you are doing a lot of work. We are all doing a lot of work uh inside, let alone outside. There doesn't need to be output for it. So I also just want to make sure that when this person, okay, they're like, I accept that me saying no to choir opens up space for something else. Yay, great. But does that mean I need to pick up another hobby or like start
No. Yeah.
crafting or reading a book or like doing something productive? Like, no, you are also allowed to open up space to just be. It sounds like maybe that's what you need right now. Um,
Totally.
because I really relate to that guilt and that like cycle,
Oh.
that endless cycle that we put ourselves through of I'm too busy. Oh, I'm ashamed that I'm doing nothing. Oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm ashamed that I'm doing nothing. Like,
Yeah. That's
let's
relatable.
stop. Let's all stop.
Yeah, maybe the thing you're opening yourself up to is just like having some sanity in your life because you have time to chill and recharge. Um,
And do better
instead
at
of
the things you are doing, you know?
yeah, just be a person who's like more healthy in their mind.
Yeah.
Um, but also if you end up feeling like, well, I do want something new, I think that pause is almost entirely required just as much. I've talked about it a lot before, so I won't harp on it now, but like for me quitting acting, it was not a glorious moment. It was probably one of the most difficult, shameful, multi-year processes um that I've been through. It didn't feel heroic. It didn't feel bold. It felt shameful. It felt um like a quitter. It felt kind of pathetic. And I had no idea what I was looking to fill that with instead.
Hmm.
And now looking back, I actually think it was incredibly courageous. And I think a lot of people have hard time saying no And so because saying yes is easier. It's like which includes more friction for you. Courage
Hmm.
isn't just saying yes and knowing when to say yes. It's knowing when to do the frictionful thing. Frictionous? What would be the word?
Uh,
Fricked,
frictiony,
fricked,
frick,
frictiony thing.
fricty.
Could be fricty, the fricty thing, which could be saying no, it could be saying yes. But that's what courage is doing the thing that's going to bring more friction. And and you don't have to know exactly why you're doing it in the moment. Like after acting, I needed several years to simmer. I just run a marathon. It would be insane for me to then start doing a sprint. Like athletes rest. You need to rest. So rest and simmer. And if you want to fill that chorus evening with something else, you don't have to do it right away either.
I love the reminder that we're all just athletes. That made me feel really good.
We
Just
are.
a bunch
We
of
are.
runners.
Just a bunch of runners and lab scientists.
Yeah, exactly. We do it all. Um, so there's like, I don't know if there's actually anything here. I think there is.
Okay.
There's a
Believe in
last
yourself, Jess. Believe in yourself.
there's a last what to do that is not really a what to do because it already happened and it's just a story from me.
I like
But I was
that.
thinking about this topic
Oh, it's a story
and
from you?
yeah,
Oh, sweet. Okay.
I was thinking about this topic leading up to the episode and I was like, how actually have I started to say no more in my life? Like in my day-to-day life, not even
Yeah.
in the big relationships that have issues and that are stressful and where there's differences of opinion, not even there, just like in my day-to-day life, because I do think that I've observed myself saying no more easily than I could have a couple years ago. And so like, how did that even
Uh-huh.
happen?
Yeah,
And
tell
I
me.
think one of the things I realized is like practicing with people that you trust, like in safe environments, whether that's with your partner or with your best friends, like practicing with the people that you have some level of comfort knowing that like they're not really going to go anywhere if you say no to like that one hang. I
That's
feel
already hard
like
enough. That's
that
still
is
scary
hard,
enough, right? It's already
right?
hard. That
It's
was
not
already
going to
scary to
be,
me.
yeah, it's not going to be 0% difficult, but it's probably going to be a lower percent difficult than
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
standing up to your mom about raising your child in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like that's one thing. And then I was reflecting on like, okay, have I done that recently? And there was an interesting thing that happened in my friend group earlier this week. Um, we all like to watch Ravens football games together. And there's a Ravens bar in Chicago that we often go to for game nights and go and watch from there. And two of my friends just had a baby like a few months ago.
Two
And so it's
babies
been,
or one baby together?
oh, one baby together, one baby
Okay.
together.
Okay.
And it just life has been more challenging, obviously, ever since then for them. Like they are figuring out being parents and getting back to work after leave and still having a social life and feeling like humans. And it's been really kind of amazing to have like a passenger seat too and watch them navigate and kind of be there for them through. But because of the new baby, it was going to be hard for them to go to the bar on that day to watch the game. And they were like, well, maybe one of us could just go and the other one can sit this one out and just be home with the baby. Oh, but really, we just had therapy and we're both feeling like we really need like time with adults. Um, and there were just like all these factors going on internally for them and in their relationship that were like,
Yeah.
we really want to both be able to come. And the only way that we can both come is if we also bring the baby. And the baby is too young to bring to a crowded bar. We're not comfortable with that. So what do? They're two of my best friends. They texted the group text and they were like, any way that someone, maybe Jess, since you have like a bigger space, can host for the game rather than all of us going to the bar. I, as the extroverted social butterfly that I am, was like totally down to host. I just kind of got my new living room together. It's like cozy and ready for people to come over. And it's my best friends and it's the Ravens game. And I was like super excited. But in my life, internally, in my relationship, there's some struggles right now with like adjusting to living together with me and Ryan. I've talked about them a little bit in the last couple of episodes. We're just like figuring it out and figuring out what the balance is of together time, alone time, time with other people. We figured
Mm-hmm.
that out earlier in our relationship, and now we're kind of having to like relearn it and readjust as we are
Makes
around each
sense.
other all the time in our home.
Yeah.
And he had recently expressed like a need for a little bit more downtime and alone time. And I take that seriously. I want to respect that. And so my friends coming to me and saying, "Hey, we really need this. Can you host?" And me being like, "Ugh, like any other week, yes." But literally 2 days ago, Ryan expressed to me like really needing alone time. And I just don't want to so quickly have like 8 people over and a newborn baby crying
Yep.
um, when he said that. And of course, they were
So
understanding.
tough. So tough.
But I was really like feeling that I was
Mhm.
apologetic even, which like I didn't have to be, and they didn't make me, feel that I needed to be. But I was just like, I know I like understand that you guys are trying to make this work, and we all just want to see each other and have this fun night, and there's so many factors to consider. Like I basically had to choose my boundary because of stuff in my relationship over the stuff in their relationship and the boundary they had of like we can't go to the bar and this and that and the other.
Yeah.
And they were okay with that. They're my best friends. They want me to choose my boundaries. But it still struck me as like this interesting moment of being
Yeah.
faced with this choice of like, I could just let it go and just host them to make it easier and make them happy because I know that that's something that they really like need right now. And even Ryan like would probably understand this one time and uh it would all be okay. And like staying firm and not choosing to do it that way was kind of a interesting thing to watch myself do. And so that is just an example of like a day-to-day thing where you're faced with this option to say no or to go with it. And honestly, either would have been fine. And I still knew that like the right thing for me at that time was to say no. And everything was okay. And they're my best friends and they love me and they accepted it.
Whoa. I
And
would have
you
been
can do it.
stressed. I would
Well,
have
you
been
know what's even funnier
stressed.
is that
Yeah.
Ryan and I ended up having a miscommunication and he was actually okay with them coming the whole time. So they did come and that happened last night. But and I
That's
was
the
like,
perfect
JK
ending.
guys, actually, classically, I was trying to respect Ryan's boundary. But really, what happened is that we had a miscommunication. So either way, we're working on it. You guys can come over. But it was still for the
Yeah,
time period for like the 24 hours that we had no clue where we were all going to watch the
totally.
Ravens game. Somebody
Totally.
was going to have to be disappointed. I
Yeah.
was holding firm in what I thought I needed to do for my life and my relationship, even in the face of what my best friends needed, and
Yeah.
it was going to be okay.
I think that captures the difficulty so well. Somebody wrote in too about like, can you talk about like how it's hard to say no, or like it's easy to say no when people are emotionally mature and like understand
Yeah,
boundaries, but it's hard to say no with, the people you love or people, not your best friends or not your boyfriend, but people who are close and are horribly emotionally immature. And I was like, in my head, I was like, oh yeah, I feel like that's 100% what we're talking about. But it's true. It's just as hard with the people who are healthy. And that's usually, I think this idea that like, oh, I guess like multiple people are going to end up feeling disappointed here. Like
mm.
you felt like you were disappointing your friends. I'm sure there was a part of you that was disappointed. The baby's disappointed. Like who knows what's Ryan's feeling? This idea that like you can make one decision and like it's not even like a zero sum game. I don't know what the description is. It's like a 55 point like mess.
Yeah,
And um and it's usually not just like one villain who wants to use you for your apartment to watch the game, or one villain who wants to intrude on Ryan's life, or one villain who hates
exactly.
the baby. No, it's usually like a bunch of people with legitimate needs, with
Yes.
legitimate desires, and they're not going to match up. And people write in about that all the time, and they're like, What happens when my boundary doesn't match up with my partner's boundary? And I want to say, well, that is what life is. That is
Life.
going to be the majority of life. Your boundaries don't match up. That is the majority of it. If it's a moment where like what you need is convenient for what your friends need, then it's not a boundary. It's just like we're on the same page.
Yeah, ride that high as long as you have it. The other
Seriously.
thing that I think this illuminated for me was like the what made this whole situation easier, what made the fact that it was going to be a lose, lose, lose easier was that these are my best friends who I can communicate with openly. So
Yeah.
they communicated with me what was going on internally for them and in their relationship that
Yes.
made
Yeah,
it
you're
so
so
that
right.
they were asking to kind of like invite themselves over and change the plan. And
Yep.
I was able to tell them what was going on in my relationship and my personal life to say why I couldn't do that. And
Yes.
I think that is honestly the only way to navigate the misalignment of boundaries with people close to you in day to day
Mm-hmm.
is like you just got to be open and tell them the why. Because
Mm-hmm.
if it's somebody who actually is going to be there for you in the long haul and who's willing to like even if they're not, we're all emotionally maturing all the time. Even if they're not the most emotionally mature person in the world, if they have the capacity to want to be open and learn and be a good friend to you, then like they should be able to receive a little bit more of that background and you should be able to receive it too. And it makes it a lot easier to face disappointment because, yeah, I'm bummed that this plan isn't going to work out, but I also understand why and it's very reasonable.
Yeah.
And I just want my friends to be okay. And like, I don't know. We'll get them next time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that doing it with friends like that and practicing setting boundaries in those small ways with friends where you can give the background and you can give
Yeah.
that like extra level of insight sets you up to be able to do it with people who you feel less comfortable with and in
Mm-hmm.
situations where it's more scary because you've practiced and you've seen how disappointment can happen and then you can move on from it. And
Yeah.
you've practiced like saying the whole truth and you've practiced like holding to the thing that you need to prioritize in that moment. And so, anyway, I just think it's like necessary practice if you can find those parts of your life and those moments of opportunity to put in that practice. Um, you just have to get comfortable with it. You just have to get comfortable with the fact that it's not going to go. There's never going to be a situation, there's very few situations where like everyone is perfectly content with the way that it panned out.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect distinction to differentiate what you went through with your friends who were emotionally mature and what the listener is encountering with their mom, who may be emotionally mature in other areas, but certainly not in this one, and doesn't understand like a boundary or care sufficiently about her child's experience in this one arena. And with your emotionally mature friends, I think sharing the context and sharing the inner workings, I completely agree. And I'm so glad that you pointed that out. I think that makes it. And then I
Yeah.
think in the other situation, when you're dealing with someone who either doesn't respect boundaries or doesn't sufficiently care about what the experience is like for you, I think you can share the context maybe once, just so you can like
Yeah.
know for your own peace of mind that you did it, you tried, you gave them the opportunity to access that context. But after that, I don't think the context has any effect on them. And that's when I would say like action and consequence is a lot more
Yeah.
the boundary. You know what I mean? Whereas like with your friends, they're not going to try to like keep re-entering your home without your permission. You don't have to,
Right.
although that
Yeah.
would be a funny dynamic. Yeah. I feel like
That is
that
a good
just
distinction.
listening to you talk about that made me feel think about that distinction.
Yeah.
Lol.
Oh, lol, very well said. La 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 la.
La 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 la.
Shall we conclude? Did we do it? What time is it?
We did
Yeah.
it. I gotta stretch. I feel like a little rat lemur. I feel like I need to like do some
Ooh,
stretching.
speaking of stretching,
Yeah.
Ryan and I started on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday doing a 10-minute stretching in the morning together. We'll just put on a stretching YouTube video and then we make
Ew.
smoothies.
I'm
It's
gonna
really
murder
cute.
you. That's really cute. Tell me the days of the week again.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, baby.
Oh my God, my limber little lemurs. Oh my God, that's so cute. You do 10 minutes of stretching and you make smoothies?
Yeah, that's become
That's
our morning ritual on those days. And
I
because
what
both of us were
time?
just complaining about
Yeah.
hurting and needing to
Yeah,
stretch and then not
I
doing
know.
anything about it for
This is our
so long.
decline. This is how we
Yeah.
die. What time of
Yeah.
the day? I need all the details. What time of the
Oh,
day and
we
what are you
do it.
wearing?
We have a calendar block for it, 9 to 10 a.m.
Oh,
It
you do
doesn't
it for an
usually,
hour?
it's not an hour. We just like have it blocked and we'll do it at some
Okay.
point in that hour, depending
Why
on
is that so
what
cute?
else is going on. And
Oh,
we
oh.
we trade off weeks who chooses the YouTube video that we're gonna follow.
Wow.
And we
Wow.
then make smoothies afterwards. And it's like a really nice way to do
Really
something
cute.
together
That's
first
really
thing in the
cute.
morning before the day gets crazy and we might like kind of miss each other the rest of the day.
I
And then
love
it's
that.
also a good way to hold ourselves accountable to stretching because neither of us would do it if we were just doing it alone. So
That's the most
recommend
wholesome
it.
shit I've ever heard. Do you
Thank you.
talk while you're stretching? Is it like chit chat time or is it quiet time?
It's kind of quiet time, but we might just like comment on what's happening in the video or like joke about the
Yeah.
weird like YouTuber that's
Yeah.
from Germany. All of them are like German women teaching us how to
Weird.
stretch, we've found.
That's interesting. Huh.
Um, so
That's really
yeah,
cute. I really
so
like
that's
that.
it. Go stretch and
Okay, babies.
send this episode to someone, I would say. Don't
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah. Send this episode to somebody who is having a hard time with boundaries, setting their own, needs a little emboldening. And you know what? It's also okay if you've identified a boundary that you're like not ready to execute yet. So just name
Hmm.
for yourself, this is why I'm not ready to do that yet. This is why I'm not. And this is why I'm choosing not to take that option. But I understand it and it's there whenever I'm ready. And this has been not for everyone. You're not for everyone. And that's why you got to say no sometimes. And that is just part of the human life.
Woohoo.
And we love you.
She nailed it. Kisses.